I'm John Beaudin of the Aircom Radio Network. Our special guest today is Vice President of Programming for Newcap Radio in Halifax. He's been in radio a lot of years, and a few years ago, he wrote a book that really impacted me and helped me look at all my promotional needs in a different way. Made me think smarter. The book is Brand Like a Rock Star. Our special guest is Steve Jones. Steve, what was it that got you to write this book? Was it your experience in radio?
I think I can trace it back to a few points. One was as a radio programmer losing in a top 40 battle in Edmonton years ago, and not being able to figure out why we were losing when we were playing the same songs as the other station. We had a strong musical proposition. I thought we had a lot of great things happening on our station, and we were losing all the time. And that led me down the path of Reese and Trout and the idea of branding and the idea of expectations. And in radio, it's a unique industry because when someone's deciding to listen to station A over station B, they don't necessarily, well, they have no idea what's on station B. They're listening to station A, they don't like what they hear, they hit the button and they end up on station B, but they do so without knowing what they're about to get. And that's unlike almost any other business. If you're at Burger King and you think, I want a Big Mac, you know to go to McDonald's. It's exactly what they serve. There's no wondering what you'll get when you get there. And with radio, it's different. You don't know what song will be on. And it led me down that road of establishing a brand identity. So that is what drives people to make those decisions. They choose station B or station A based on the perception that something good will happen to them, or they will feel some positive emotion or some negative emotion or some sort of emotion by choosing that radio station. So there was the Reese and Trout influence. There was so many great books. B.J. Bueno's cult branding book. A ton of influences from guys like Roy H. Williams, people like that who have written extensively about the human decision-making process. And then fast forward a few years, I was at a course in Austin, Texas about persuasive communication, and the assignment was to write a piece about almost anything. Had to be about 800 words. And I was sitting on the patio drinking a beer, listening to Margaritaville, and thinking, how did that son of a bitch get so wealthy off that one song? And so I wrote about the brand of Jimmy Buffett. And that immediately led me to think, well, what about the brand of Kiss, the brand of Garth Brooks, the brand of Taylor Swift, the brand of the Rolling Stones? What have these people done either entirely on purpose or completely by accident that has helped make them so successful? And that's really the genesis of the book and everything that's come from it.
Talking to Steve Jones, author of Brand Like a Rock Star. Steve, I love your story on Jimmy Buffett. Now, I hadn't really thought about the fact that he had such a great brand until you laid it out.
What Buffett did is take one song, which fortuitously was a song that was sort of autobiographical about his brand, really. He was a busker in Key West. He was a kid who grew up on the Gulf Coast. He lived and breathed that warm Gulf Coast ocean air. So when he wrote Margaritaville, it wasn't a stretch for his personality. But then he took that one song and created a brand around it and created it based on experience. He gave his fans the chance to let go and live like a beach bum for a couple of hours. He gave you the chance to have no worries in the world but where to find your lost shaker of salt and who to blame for your sorry state in life. And he's expanded that into everything he's done, every song he's recorded, every tour he's gone on. If you look at the names of his tours over the years, the name of his band, the Coral Reefer Band, embodies everything that is Buffett. He's expanded into restaurants and footwear and housewares and beer and everything. And he just keeps going and growing and getting richer and richer. Yet he's not making a particularly large catalog of compelling new music. He's not doing a lot of the things you'd expect a rock star to do. But he's incredibly wealthy. No denying he's incredibly successful. He appears to be incredibly happy. And I think there's a lot we can learn from that for our personal brand development or for our business brand development about creating an emotionally powerful experience for your customers or for your fans or for your friends or your listeners, whatever it might be. Give them something to feel instead of focusing on what you sell. Focus on what experience that provides for them, what emotional hot buttons are punched when they use your product or engage with your company.
We're talking about the book Brand Like a Rock Star with the author Steve Jones. Steve, you've been in radio a lot of years. What's been the reaction from radio people to the book?
Radio people were slow, but they're not slow. They were slow to embrace it, but they became very supportive over the course of time. In fact, in the early days after I wrote the book and I started to speak and do sort of the book tour lecture circuit kind of routine, very few radio companies approached me, very few radio conventions approached me. That's changed over the course of 2 years in a huge way, and I'm very grateful for that. In the early days, I thought maybe we're the kind of industry that shuns its own when they try something new, but I don't think that's the case. I just think the radio industry was a bit more cynical and a little slower to embrace it, but they certainly have now, and I'm incredibly grateful for that, and incredibly grateful for what NewCap's allowed me to do in terms of freeing me up to do some of this stuff. They've been gracious in understanding that the expansion of my brand probably helps their brand in terms of recruitment and establishing an identity for the company. And then outside of radio, it's been fantastic because radio people have heard a lot of these stories before, but outside of the entertainment industry, a lot of what I have to say is relatively fresh. Stories about bands that people love that they haven't heard before. So what I sense happening when I'm speaking and when I hear people talk about the book is that their mind is opened up by the engaging story about the artist they love or don't love, but an artist they've heard of. And when their mind is open, suddenly the other information that's related to it, as far as branding goes, permeates in without any sort of effort. You're learning without even knowing you're learning. You're just enjoying the stories. And that's really what the whole point is, right? I wasn't a particularly great student, and I can remember my grade 9 history teacher, Mr. Embry. He didn't teach history, he just told stories. He would close the textbook and then tell you an hour-long story about Vimy Ridge. And I remember more about history from his stories than I ever could from a textbook. So I just try to tell some really cool stories and then weave in the underlying business messages within them.
Our special guest is Steve Jones, and his book is Brand Like a Rock Star. Near the end of this video, we'll tell you a little about his new book coming out next year. Steve, I love your story about Fleetwood Mac. In 1977, when Rumors came out, I was 17 years old, and I remember turning the album around and noticing they all looked like movie characters. And I don't know if that was strategic, but they really built a brand.
They were 5 unique characters that you had Mick Fleetwood there, who looks like he could be out of a Renaissance fair. And Lindsey Buckingham looking like a typical 70s afro and ready to party at the disco, and Stevie Nicks, the Welsh witch, and the classy Christine McVie, and the sort of deck shoes and ball cap, shy, reserved John McVie. It's amazing clash of personalities. And I'm not sure that the costumes were a conscious effort to brand, but it sure worked. I can say exactly as you said, looking at Stevie Nicks in 1977, in that era, not only was she beautiful, but she was mystical and magical. And the songs that she sang were mystical and magical. And when she went on stage and wore the flowing gowns and twirled to Rhiannon, it was all those things. And even to this day, Stevie Nicks looks mystical and magical to me when she walks out on stage. I saw Fleetwood Mac last year, and she's, a lot older and a lot less nimble on the high heels, but it's still magic when she does that.
We're talking to Steve Jones, author of Brand Like a Rock Star, and he has a new book coming out in 2014 called Start You Up. One last question. Miley Cyrus. That was very strategic. You and I seem to be on the same page with this one.
It was the Miley Cyrus thing. It was, and everything she continues to do is a very well calculated strategic move. She's on the Barbara Walters, most interesting people of the year interviews. Her album has sold millions. The video came out right on time. It was, as you look back on it, a carefully crafted marketing campaign. And I did take some heat for expressing that, because my view is that the Miley Cyrus brand is an A-level brand that could only be better if she began to turn some of that energy maybe toward charity and did a little bit more, a few goodwill deposits in the bank, because she's certainly making a lot of edgy withdrawals from the bank of goodwill. But otherwise, it's an A-plus brand. And I did take some heat from people who said, well, she's being exploited, she's being sexualized, she's, setting back women, and I guess all those things are true. But that's not my analysis. I'm not here to analyze whether she's being exploited. I can't tell you for sure whether she's mature enough to understand the implications of her twerking long term and whether her grandchildren will be proud of her or not. I don't know those things. as long as what she's doing is voluntary and she's a consenting adult, and I'm sure it is, um, her and her people have done a masterful job at establishing the exact kind of brand they want to establish.
I want to thank Steve Jones for joining us. His book is Brand Like a Rock Star. There are links right underneath this video. His new book called Start You Up comes out in early 2014. We'll let you know about that. I'm John Beaudin from the Aircom Radio Network.